Good afternoon. We will call the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure to order. Could the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Levitt. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Wheeler. Assemblyman Yeager. Chairman Roe Moreno.
And I am here. Please show that all of our members are present. We thank those that are joining us by video. We appreciate your patience. It is a deadline day. So we have one matter before the committee for your consideration. It is Senate Bill 328. It's on for a work session, and I will turn it over to our committee policy analyst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Katie Seaman, S-I-E-M-O-N, Committee Policy Analyst for the record. Senate Bill 328, in its first revision, revises provisions relating to energy storage systems. The measure was sponsored by Senator Lang. It was first heard before this committee on May 11th, 2021. Senate Bill 328 requires the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, or PUCN, to reevaluate regulations setting biennial targets for the procurement of energy storage systems based upon the most recent Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP, filed by an electric utility, and to make any necessary revisions to these targets no later than November 1st, 2022. The PUCN must also submit a report to the Legislative Commission no later than November 1st, 2022, regarding its reevaluation of the biennial targets and any adopted or pending modifications to the targets. The bill also requires a person installing an energy storage system to hold a valid license in electrical contracting with any subclassification required by the State Contractors Board, and for installations for non-residential properties performed on or after July 1st, 2022, a certificate of completion of the Energy Storage and Microgrid Training and Certification, or ESAMTAC program. There is one proposed amendment that is attached following this bill page. It would require the PUCN to establish biennial targets that deliver the greatest benefits to the customers of the electrical utility in relation to the costs of the procurement of the energy storage systems. The amendment defines the term electrochemical energy storage system and provides that no one shall install an electrochemical energy storage system in this state unless, number one, the individual holds a valid license classification required to perform this work, and number two, the work is performed by or under the direct supervision of a person holding an ESAMTAC certification if the installation is for a non-residential property and is performed on or after July 1, 2022. Both the State Contractors Board and the PUCN have determined there is no fiscal impact the measure is introduced. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Members, you have before you the amendment that's in Nellis, but also handed to us at the start of this meeting is a additional amendment from the sponsor and those helping the sponsor with this bill. Are there any questions or discussions? We do have the sponsor here so we have a few. We're going to start with Assemblyman Ellison and then Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just got the new mock-up here just when we all got it. There's a couple things on here. If you look, it's for residential power only, for secondary distribution, not for secondary distribution, only primary. But yet, if you look at Section 2B, and it talks about residential property means improved real estate that consists of not more than 4. So they're saying that this does consist of anything above 4 apartments. But how in the heck are you going to do that when this is supposed to be a secondary, not a primary, not a secondary? So you're saying it does go back in and feed to the system. And here's my concerns. It's the sponsor of the bill did a great job trying to get this thing out. We've been trying to work on it. But I can name so many things in this room right here that's set by battery backup. So that exit light's a battery backup, that clock's a battery backup, that emergency sign over there is a battery backup. So all this stuff is backed up by a battery backup system, even though it's internal. And what we're trying to do is get through this. Anything that's internally operated has got to be exempt under this bill. And that's what we've been trying to get to. But we're talking two different systems. Secondary is where the pole, you see the pole outside of your building that comes into building, and there's distribution panels that goes in, and it goes into sub panels that feeds the power to the building. That's a secondary. A primary line is where the pole, and if you're generating power out from a grid, from like solar panels, whatever, that goes to that grid and goes out. Well, that's not what this says. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're on the same playing field and we're talking the same language. But you're already saying in section B that it's at a later date that anything that's 4 units or more, that falls under. That's a secondary distribution, not a primary. You see what I'm getting at? So residential is still in here, even though it might be a commercial apartment house, but you're talking two different systems. Power line, the main power line might be 4160. That's volts. A residential house, or if it's a commercial building, is 122.08 three-phase or single phase. If it's a house, it's 122.40. That's the difference. But there's a difference between the primary and the secondary, and that's what we're trying to get through. That nothing in the primary building, existing building, should be exempt under this bill. And I'm hoping maybe you can clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison. Will Adler, for the record, representing Silver State Government Relations and IBEW 1245. If I may jump right in there. So the intent of this bill is obviously not to cover all batteries or all batteries that you would find in commercially available products like generators, like emergency signs, like other emergency systems that have self-housed battery units. The intent is large energy storage systems. In fact, most of these storage systems to date aren't, classified as batteries, but there's a variety, either, liquid salt to a kinetic train to everything else. To clarify what energy storage systems we wish to use in this training for the ESMTAC, the clarity here is to make it a chemical battery storage or a lithium-ion battery usually, and these are things like the size of this table. The intent is for that size battery for the taking in of a large solar charge usually, and it's to redistribute it back out onto the grid at a later date. It's not for internal use. It's not a small battery, and it's not for any of those small commercial things you did mention on this side of the line, as it were. We are hooking up things on the primary side of the line, and this is for usually distribution back onto a grid. Hopefully, the intent of that could be clarified a little bit more. I did produce some language myself that is just mocked up by me that hopefully I could clarify this more to make it these are not batteries, what an energy storage system is. But what we were told earlier was because we use energy storage system earlier in the bill and the PUC's already regulated energy storage systems and the targets of those in the term energy storage system, meaning for the storage of solar power, green energy, usually whatever energy it is, for distribution later at night, that we didn't have to further clarify it down below, that it was just electrochemical versions of that energy storage system. But if more clarification was needed, I did want to help provide that to you, or at least say it on the record here today. Assemblyman Ellison, thank you. But this is not, the intent is not to do any of those things, and it is to keep it solely to that one function of a large electrochemical energy storage system for, commercial or, utility use. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have concerns about the interpretation of electrochemical energy storage system from my colleague here, because we already have existing regulations around how energy storage systems, which is a very broad definition, are regulated in the state of Nevada. So in this case, given the chapter that this is in, which is it's chapter 624, I would like to ask legal to weigh in on what does chapter 624 regulate, and how is that generally interpreted with regard to the definition of energy storage system or other systems that are regulated under that chapter through like the other licensing standards that exist in that chapter?
Ms. Dahmer?
This is Jessica Demmer with the LCV Legal Division. If I understand the question, so Chapter 624 relates to contractors, creates the state contracting board, and relates to work that requires a licensed contractor. I can say that there are certain types of work that are excluded under NRS 624.031, such as
And that list is pretty extensive. I think I took a look at that list after the last time we had this conversation, because I had similar concerns as my colleague that energy storage system is such a broad definition. I think, though, that as we interpret it in our regulations, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, we regulate not the storage system itself, but the licensing for the installation of those storage systems. And because we don't have a license that regulates the installation of batteries or other minor storage systems that exist in our buildings, that this wouldn't necessarily apply to extending that. It would be narrowed to the way we interpret the definition as it exists today, which is if you are required to have a contractor to install it, it would have to meet this licensing standard. Am I incorrect in that assessment?
again, this is Jessica Demmer with the LCB Legal Division. The language of the bill states that you must hold a valid license in the classification required to perform such work issued pursuant to this chapter. So that could be interpreted as not applying to work that doesn't require a valid license.
And generally, in the public's understanding, it doesn't require a license to buy or install a battery. Like a Duracell size battery.
Well, the Chapter 624 doesn't include the construction, alteration, improvement, or repair of personal property. Typically, personal property is, as opposed to real property that would be land, building, improvement to real property. That would be the type of thing that would have say, a Duracell battery. But there could be things that are attached to a building that might be considered real property that could use a battery. I don't know that it would be a Duracell-sized battery. That's a factual question that I couldn't answer.
Quick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand that we just got this language, and so I apologize for putting our legal counsel, Ms. Dummer, in the hot seat on this. But I'll try and just state it a little bit clearer and ask the question in a straightforward way. Does the current language, does legal believe it could be construed to require ESAMTAC training for general contracting work that would install fairly common devices that may have a small battery integrated in them? Or do you believe that the language that has been prepared would, along with the provision of legislative intent, would only apply it to larger scale energy storage systems, larger scale battery systems that are outside of kind of a component of another device that are specifically designed to store larger amounts of energy and deploy them to various devices later at a later time? This
is Jessica Demmer with the LCB Legal Division. The definition from the amendment that was handed to us just before the meeting doesn't specify the size of the battery. It would depend on how you interpreted what it meant to distribute electricity outside of a system. I don't know enough about batteries to tell you if that would only be large batteries.
So I'm looking at chapter 624. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I may. Thank you. And there's an exception in here. It's section 624.031 sub 6 that says any work to repair or this is a provisions of this chapter do not apply to any work to repair or maintain property, the value of which is less than $1,000, including labor and materials, unless there are some stipulations, which include the type of work performed is electrical. So installing a battery doesn't require that, and the pieces of property that you would reinstall a battery into, right, would be something that costs $30 at Costco, not $1,000. I mean, I'd like an example of $1,000 piece of equipment where a battery is a piece of maintenance and operation. Mr. Ellison, if you have an example of that.
Nevada state law says any commercial building has got to have a master's license with a C2 for his company. That's a law. Maintenance is where somebody goes and pulls a battery out of a clock or whatever. That is maintenance. But anything in electrical, they can't fall under maintenance. Anything over $1,000, they can't change a switch, they can't change a plug, they can't do any of this. It's the license licensed contractor has to do it. Union, non-union, whatever. That's the law. But when we got clarification from when they did they presented the bill to begin with, I asked them, I said, are we talking 15 kW or 150 watts or 15 kW or kilovolts? What are we talking? And he said everything. That's what created the problem, is there's a difference between 150 watts, 150 kVA, or kilovolts. So, I mean, the difference is massive in a whole different system. And what we're trying to do is just trying to verify that we're not putting these small businesses into massive problems with not understanding what the intent of the bill is. And that's the problem. When I ask that question, and there's a difference between go changing a battery, and like that exit light up there, it's got a battery backup in there. But you can take that down and change that light, and it's cheaper to throw it away. But it still has a battery in it. And it's got to be disposed of properly because of the chemicals in the battery. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to protect all these thousands and thousands and thousands of small businesses out there and trying not to get away from the intent. And when you got to go take a class from a union class there's only 2 offered in the state of Nevada, that's a problem for tens of thousands of electricians out there.
Will Adler, for the record. Assemblyman Ellison, as I stated previously in my testimony today, the intent of this bill is not to do that in any way and not to require that training in any way for any standard electrical work or any electrical work done today. This is to be done on larger scale, larger units for the storage of energy commercially or on a utility scale. I mean, this is a so whatever clarity would be needed to make sure that is clear, I think Assemblywoman Peters is trying to make sure that clarity is provided in this bill, or that LCB thought that with the legislative intent and with the previous history of energy storage devices already regulated by the PUC, that would be clear, so that isn't a problem in the future, because that is not the intent. Thank you.
And Madam Chair?
One last question, then we're moving on to Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you. Madam Chair, what I'm trying to get at is that we should have defined if it was 150 kVA or what it is, and that has not been addressed even right now. And we're talking apples from oranges. It's a whole different system. And we started to get the process, but you went right back into residential. And tell me what kind of system you're going to put on a fourplex of a system of this size. That doesn't exist. So, thank you.
Assemblyman Levitt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just I get a little concerned when we talk about intent of bills, because intent of bills is so interpretive. And if you don't lay it out there, and it seems like there was ample opportunity to lay it out there and really address without talking about intent, talking about actual language, when we pass laws, when we pass regulations, if people have to guess what the intent is, that's a problem. And my concern is that somebody will want to put a small solar panel on their business. It doesn't even have to be a fourplex. It could be their office building to run something small inside of their building, and that you can buy it on Amazon, and it's going to cost you more than $1,000, and it has a battery, and it's probably not that big. I mean, it's not as big as that table, but there's just nothing clearly defining whether they can do it or not. And that's a problem for me, because intent doesn't mean anything if you don't write it out in the language and say, okay, the battery has to be this size, this, I don't know electricity very well, kilowatt or whatever storage, or even it has to be smaller than 3x2 or whatever it is. But anything that can clarify, what a property owner can and can't do, what they're regulated by law to do, and if they have to guess, and if they guess wrong, they're in trouble, then that's a problem for me. So I think that's where the kind of the rubber hits the road on this, is it's just not clearly defined in the language what you can and can't do. Electrochemical energy means absolutely nothing to me. I have no idea what that means. And so I'm going to have to research it to find out, and then go back to this hearing and go, well, the intent was this. I struggle with that. So is there a way we can get there? I guess I have to form it into a question. I apologize, Madam Chair. Is there a way we can get there so it's not up to interpretation? It's not up to guesswork from a property owner that's just trying to power something or install something that's not going to require a contractor.
Will Adler, for the record, Assemblyman Levitt, I do agree with you, and I do think that needs to be part of this issue in its entirety. But one of the issues with energy storage devices I've been running into all year, all of a sudden, is the lack of definitions around them in Nevada law and in Nevada statute. We did pass something in 2017 that made them look into energy storage devices at a state level from the PUC. PUC then took that direction and used it to implement a plan for NV Energy to start buying and purchasing energy storage devices to make sure they capture the extra green capacity for going forward. Because in the future, it's no longer just solar. It's hybrid. It's a hybrid program, which is solar plus battery, right? Underneath those definitions, that framework, the PUC regulated what is energy storage devices. So we refer to them as energy storage devices in this, BDR and then bill, because that was the term used before by the PUC for devices intended to store excess energy for a later use. To clarify this further, I did mock up myself a highlighted version that was distributed to the committee today that does add a few terms to it that would say energy storage for distribution outside the system at a later date. That would imply that energy is, yes, stored in that system temporarily, but the intent of that energy is to be used outside of that system, hence the batteries for distribution out to the power grid or whatever other body there is. That could clarify it further, but at this time we didn't even know if that was necessary, because previously it had not thought to be necessary when we reviewed it with legal intent, but there's so few, hard and fast definitions under NRS or NAC on this subject in Nevada that maybe we would need to add something like that highlighted section I provided, but I truly don't know. But the intent, as I keep saying, and I know you don't like intent, is not for that, and is not to address anything that a current electrical contractor could do in the state. Is to address something that's happening and going to be happening in the future, that this training is to provide safety and assurity for, because these are large new energy systems that usually are lithium-ion batteries and are trying to be referred to in this bill. So again, We don't wish to muddle the intent, and if there's more clarity needed, we could ask for that to be provided. But the bill as written hopefully was intended to read as it is for energy storage systems such as the ones PUC asked through the regulations to be provided to the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members with questions or comments? Okay, last one.
I'm sorry, I have one that does not have to do with electrochemical energy storage systems. I would, though, appreciate to get on the record a conversation that we had regarding the training program and what that is and how it is accessible. My understanding at this point is that it is an open curriculum that's accessible by anybody, that's been developed by Penn State. You just have to get in contact with them to ensure you are trained properly in the actual training of that program. Can you just clarify that that is the actual case and that this is not something that is isolated only to potentially union training programs?
Thank you. Will Adler for the record. So the curriculum produced by Penn State University was energy storage and microgrid training and certification program based on these new energy storage systems that are coming online in the last 5 years. So that is a general terminology for the training needed to work on any of these energy storage systems. And that sort of is a curriculum they came up with that comes with 13 different syllabuses that is available for anyone to contract and use as a training platform. It's not specifically a union platform or anyone else's platform. It is publicly available to anyone who contacts them on those websites. They are setting up trainings in the state, regularly. It's about every month they're setting up a new batch of people who are union and non-union. It is publicly available and will be provided to whoever wants to take it because more people need this training, and that service is just there to provide it to whoever wants to learn. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a comment really quick. First of all, I just want to take a step back, thank the sponsors of the bill for working to address some of the questions and concerns that came out of the initial hearing on the bill. Appreciate all the work that went into narrowing in some of these definitions, moving some of the pieces around so that I think they make more sense and work for the bill. Also, I'd just like to very briefly say that there are times when our laws are called into question, and when they are, the legislative record and legislative intent is critical, and I think we've made it abundantly clear what the intent is on this bill. So with that, I would like to make a motion to amend and do pass SB 328, incorporating proposed amendment 3318, and not the additional language that was just provided to us.
Do I have a second on the motion? It's been moved by Assemblyman Watts, seconded by Assemblywoman Peters. I think we've had quite enough discussion on it, so I'm just going to move to the vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And will those in opposition please raise your hand so that I can call you off? Great. We have Assemblyman Levitt, Assemblyman Ellison, Assemblyman Wheeler, Assemblyman Roberts. Motion passes. The last item on our agenda is floor statement. I'll give it to Assemblywoman Peters. She kept us here for a long time. We were just going to go to public comment. Okay, let's do that. So with that, we will close the work session on Senate Bill 328. And the last thing on our agenda is public comment. But you can give public comment.
Chair?
We have one person in our room for public comment, and then we'll go to Zoom.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Uh-huh.
Members of the committee, Roberta Lang, State Senator for District 7. I know this has been really hard for all of us, and it's the last day, the last moment. And we've all worked really hard on this, and I know tensions are high, and I just wanted to let you know my appreciation for all of your input and your comments, and I hope that we can continue to move this bill forward. I think it's a good bill for Nevada, but I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. See no one else here in the room for public comment, we'll go to our virtual platform. Do we have anyone joining us by Zoom or on telephone who wish to provide public comment?
Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Members, that was the only bill on our work session agenda, and seeing that that is complete, this meeting is now adjourned. And for those of you going to judiciary, your meeting will be starting momentarily.